Good morning, everyone. This is Miss Osteen. I am now going to do a summary of Lesson 3. Once again, your Lesson 3 main ideas were posted on Google Classroom, and I'm going to just go ahead and go over that and review that. You should have read Lesson 3. That was assigned to you as well. In Lesson 3, we have two major sections. One is called the two Christian churches, and one is the spread of Christianity. Now, the two Christian churches goes from page 22 to page 24. The Byzantines created their own Christian church in the Eastern Roman Empire, and it was called the Eastern Orthodox Church. The Byzantines believed the emperor was God's representative on earth. They rejected the authority of the Pope, and the Pope led the Roman Catholic Church. So here are our two churches. We have the Roman Catholic Church, it was led by the Pope, and then we have the Eastern Orthodox Church, and they believed the emperor was God's representative on earth. Military events and disagreements over leadership and icons led to the division of the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church in 1054 CE. Now, in your workbook that you were assigned to complete last week on Lesson 3, one of the questions asked you about what were some of the reasons or events that happened to cause the split between these two churches. One of them was the dispute of icons. Another was military events. We'll talk about that in a minute. Another one was disagreement over leadership, church authority. Who was in charge of the church? All right, and then the last one that's not written on here is roles in government. That was the fourth one. Okay? If you look at page 22, one of your questions on your in your workbook that you were assigned to complete asked what was the definition of icons. It was at the bottom of I believe the first slide. What is an icon? Some of you gave me definitions that came from Google, but the definition I was looking for could have been in the back of this book, or you could have written icons are paintings of Jesus, Mary the mother of Jesus, and the saints, or Christian holy people. Many Byzantines displayed these icons in their homes. They also covered the walls of the churches with them. People who displayed icons claimed that these images symbolized the presence of God in their lives. Now, not everybody agreed with the icons. It says, some Byzantines, however, did not approve of the use of icons. They thought it was a form of idol worship forbidden by God. In 726 CE, Emperor Leo III ordered that all icons be removed from the churches. Government officials who carried out his orders were called iconoclasts. That's a vocabulary word there. They are image breakers. Okay? Today, this word refers to someone who criticizes traditional beliefs. Okay? When you come down to the bottom of page 23, it talks about the Great Split. Church authority was one. The most serious disagreement was about church authority. The Pope claimed to be the head of all Christian churches. He believed he was a successor or a person who follows another person to Peter, disciple of Jesus and first bishop of Rome. The Byzantines rejected the claim of the Pope. They believed that the Patriarch of Constantinople and other bishops were equal to the Pope. Then we had military events. Italy was invaded. The Pope appealed to the Byzantine emperor for help, but the emperor refused. So then the Pope went to someone else to ask for help. He asked the Franks. Remember, the Franks were our Germanic group. We talked about Germanic people in Lesson 1. So he went to the Franks to ask for help to defend Rome. Okay, they agreed. So when the Franks were successful at defending Italy, they, to show their appreciation or their gratitude, the Pope crowned Frankish King Charlemagne emperor in 800 CE. Okay. The Eastern and Western churches also viewed their roles in government differently. In the Byzantine Empire, the emperor controlled both church and government. Byzantine church leaders supported the decisions of the emperor. In the West, the Pope claimed he had religious and political authority over all of Europe. Okay? It says he often quarreled with the kings about church and government affairs. Quarreled means to argue. Okay? All right. And then both sides excommunicated each other. What does excommunicate mean? Excommunicate means to declare that a person or group no longer belongs to the church. So it says, after centuries of bitterness, the Patriarch of Constantinople and the Pope excommunicated each other. Okay? This created a schism or separation between the two major churches of Christianity. All right, now let's go back to our main ideas. Christians, the spread of Christianity. Christians in the Eastern Roman Empire formed communities. These were called monasteries and convents. Okay, in the convents, that's where the nuns lived, and the monks lived in the monasteries. All right, so this was the men. Monks were men, and the nuns were women. I'm sure you already knew that. These religious communities supported the Christian efforts to help others to spread Christian beliefs. Christians who traveled to convert people to Christianity were called missionaries. A Byzantine missionary invented the Cyrillic alphabet to help bring Christianity to Slavic peoples in Eastern Europe. All right, this missionary's name was called Cyril. He had a brother that was also a missionary. His name was Methodius. Okay, Anglo-Saxons invaded and settled Britain. Monks from Rome brought Christianity to Britain. Let's look at some of your questions that you had in the workbook. Well, we worked in the workbook here at school. You were assigned some slides to work on. In question number 1, it says, use the graphic organizer below to list the differences that led to the schism between the Western and Eastern Christian churches. Okay, so I gave my kids a hint of how to get started on this question. So on one side where it says the Western Christian church used icons. Eastern Christian church banned icons at times. All right, something else I wrote down was, or that we discussed in class was, the Western was led by the Pope. So who was the Eastern side led by? They were led by the Byzantine Emperor. All right, remember the Western church, they needed help in defending invasions, and so they got help from the Franks. Okay, but the Eastern refused to help. So that would go on this side. All right, the Western Christian church quarreled or argued with government leaders. The Eastern Christian church supported government officials. And then a very simple one that I put, or I discussed with my class, is that the Western church excommunicated the Patriarch of Constantinople. The Eastern church excommunicated the Pope. All right, we already talked about what is an icon. The next one is, why did Emperor Leo order the removal of icons from churches? A very simple question, and that answer was found on page 23. The reason is because they thought it was a form of idol worship forbidden by God. Okay, so that's why Emperor Leo III ordered that they be removed. All right, the next question that you had to answer was, what role did monks and nuns play in the Christian Europe? Okay, so we know that they prayed and that they lived in monasteries and convents, but what else did they do? And it tells you, let's see, at the bottom of page 25, that monks and nuns had important roles in Christian Europe. They helped the poor and ran hospitals and schools. They also helped preserve ancient Greek and Roman writings. The next question, how did the actions of Cyril and his brother Methodius show how religion can affect other aspects of society? Okay, remember, these were brothers who were missionaries. So how did their actions show how religion can affect aspects of society? It talked about Cyril and Methodius on page 26. And if you looked, or if you read your assignment that you were assigned to read, it says that their mission was to deliver the Christian message to the Slavs, a people in Eastern Europe. Okay, they felt like if they heard about it in their own language, it would help them to learn this. So because they wanted more people to learn religion in their own language, they invented a new alphabet called the Cyrillic alphabet that is still used today in Eastern Europe. All right, hold on just a second. All right, there we go. We're back in business. All right, next question. Who was largely responsible for spreading Christianity to England and Ireland? And of course, you probably see page numbers listed on this, and that's what we talked about in class when we were discussing where we found these answers. And of course, we found this on page 27. On page 27, it said, in 400 CE, a priest named Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland. In 597 CE, Pope Gregory I sent about 40 monks from Rome to bring Christianity to the Anglo-Saxons of Britain. Now let's move on to your guided reading questions you were assigned. Some of you are still working on that, and some of you I've marked things you need to correct and send it back to you, so make sure you're getting that done. All right, number 1, describing. Write 3 sentences that describe the relationship between the government and the religion of the Byzantine Empire. One thing you could have written down was that the Byzantine Emperor was in charge of the Byzantine Church. The government and church worked together. But the emperor was in charge of appointing church leaders or making decisions about the church beliefs. All right, down here, you had to give reasons for using icons, reasons for being against them. Again, we talked about that. It was on page 23. People who displayed icons claimed that these images symbolized the presence of God in their lives. They also believed that the images help people understand Christian teachings. So that right there would tell you what the reasons for using icons. The reasons for being against using icons would be because they were a form of idol worship, which they thought was forbidden by God. All right, moving on to your next slide. Factors causing the split of these churches. The Eastern Orthodox Church, it was ran by the emperor. And the Roman Catholic Church, it was ran by the Pope. All right, so I talked about 4 reasons there was a split. There was 1 over icons. There was also a dispute over the most serious disagreement was about church authority. There was a military event where the Pope asked for help, and the Byzantine emperor refused, so they got help from the Franks. Then there was roles in government. The Eastern and Western churches also viewed their roles in government differently. So there were 4 reasons. Question number 4 says, as you read, identify the rules that governed life in Christian monasteries and convents. Then write 3 sentences that describe what life was like for people who lived in these religious communities. All right, so I had a lot of different answers on this question in class, and I've seen different answers on the assignments that were assigned to my virtual learners. Some needed to be fixed, some were great answers, but some things you could have put were monks and nuns lived simple lives in monasteries and convents. They spent much of their days praying and working, but they also left their communities to help the poor and the sick and to serve as missionaries. All right, number 5, you had true and false questions. I know how much you all love true and false questions. I know my kids here in class don't like true and false questions. All right, use your textbook to decide if each statement is true or false. Write T or F on the blank next to the statement. If the statement is false, rewrite the underlined portion to make the sentence true. Okay, some people forgot to do that. All right, A, monks and nuns in Christian Europe spent all of their time praying and studying. Is that true or false? That would be false, because what else did they do? They prayed and studied, but they also worked outside their communities. Doing what? They were running hospitals and schools. I'm writing this fast, so you can't read it. I apologize. Something else they were doing where they were serving as missionaries. All right, letter B. According to the Benedictine rule, monks were expected to welcome strangers who needed food and a place to sleep. That one would be true. And one thing I did not talk about that was on page 25 is we had two different rules. We had the Basilian rule and the Benedictine rule. All right, the Greek bishop Basil created a list of rules for monks and nuns known as the Basilian rule. This list showed people how to live and pray in Eastern Orthodox monasteries and convents. In the West, religious communities followed another set of regulations called the Benedictine rule. An Italian monk named Benedict wrote these rules about 529 CE. Benedictine gave up material goods. They devoted their days to work and prayer. One of their major duties was to serve as missionaries. Okay. The next one, the Basilian rule, was for people who lived in Roman Catholic monasteries and convents. Well, I just read that one, so we know that one is false. The Benedictine rule was for the Eastern Orthodox. Okay? Or the Basilian rule was, sorry. Monks and nuns serving as missionaries helped spread Christianity through Europe. That would be true. All right, question number 6. How did the two brothers, Cyril and Methodius, succeed in bringing Christianity to the Slavs, people who lived in Eastern Europe? All right, how did they do that? They created what? They created an alphabet. Why did they do this? Because they felt like it helped them to understand Christianity if they could understand it in their own language. Okay? And then the last part, these answers to this timeline could be found on page 27. In Western Europe, missionaries focused on bringing Christianity to the Pope of Ireland and Britain. Complete the timeline below to show how this was accomplished. The first event in this historical sequence has been done for you. All right, so Roman soldiers leave Britain. So it wants to know what happened in 400 CE. Well, if you look at the last page, on page 27, it says, in the 400 CE, a priest named Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland. He set up churches and monasteries where monks helped preserve Christian and Roman learning. If you just wrote that a priest named Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland, that would be fine. 597 CE, right here. In 597 CE, Pope Gregory I sent about 40 monks from Rome to bring Christianity to the Anglo-Saxons of Britain. Now, this last one is the one that several of my students in class had trouble with, and some of you all had at home. 697 CE. It says nothing about 697 CE in the textbook, but it did talk about 597 CE, and if you come down several sentences, it says, in about 100 years, most of England had accepted the Christian faith. Well, 597 plus 100 equals 697. And so in that box, you would write that, or you would type in that most of England accepted the Christian faith. Okay, that is a wrap-up of Lesson 3. Make sure that you watch these videos that I have posted. Make sure you look at your main ideas, and you should be good to go for your chapter test on Thursday, September the 24th. I will also be doing a GIMP before we take the quiz or the test on Thursday, so if you can, please try to join in with us and play with my kids who are here in class. That would be fun, and it would be a great review for you all before you take your test. All right, hope you all have a great day.